Hello there, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on British politics. At least the EU Commission and the British government agree on one point. A long standstill has thus been overcome somehow, but many other issues are still hotly contested. Because the EU and Great Britain have apparently reached an agreement on the exchange of data in the movement of goods. This could open the way to a comprehensive solution. And time is pressing, and in fact, there is now initial progress in the dispute over the customs rules for Northern Ireland. The EU Commission and the British government have agreed on how the EU can access the British customs computer system. In this way, Brussels should be able to better understand what goods are being transported from England, Wales, and Scotland to Northern Ireland. And this is important for the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. The EU and British government have been at odds over this protocol for almost 2 years, and the agreement on the IT system is the first positive development in, a long time. Commission Vice President Maroš Šefčovič, British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, and Northern Ireland Minister Christopher Heaton Harris announced the success on Monday after a meeting in London. The agreement is an important prerequisite for building trust and providing safeguards, and forms a new basis for the negotiations, according to the joint statement. Experts on both sides should now quickly explore which other disputed issues have possible solutions. Šefčovič and Cleverly want to exchange ideas again next Monday. Cleverly's boss, Britain's new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, has said he wants to resolve the protocol dispute by April, the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Good Friday or Belfast Agreement. The agreement heralded the peace process in the former troubled region in the north of the Emerald Isle. The Northern Ireland Protocol, in turn, is intended to help avoid burdens on this process, but is a red rag for Brexit enthusiasts in the ruling Conservative Party and also for Northern Ireland's unionists. The unionists fight for the region to be tied as closely as possible to Great Britain, and the main unionist party, the DUP, don't understand politics, wants to block the formation of a government in Northern Ireland's regional parliament as long as the protocol is not changed. Northern Ireland is therefore heading for new elections. The contested protocol is part of the 2019 Brexit deal agreed between Britain and the EU. It is intended to prevent customs officers from having to check trucks and lorries between the Republic of Ireland and the rest of the Emerald Isle. Because if the almost invisible border suddenly became visible, it would enrage the nationalists in Northern Ireland. That means the mostly Catholic citizens who advocate close ties to the Republic of Ireland, or even unification, or reunification to be exact. And that would jeopardize the peace process. The protocol therefore stipulates that the former troubled region continues to adhere to EU product rules and customs regulations despite Brexit. However, the logical consequence is that deliveries of goods from England, Wales, or Scotland to Northern Ireland must be checked. Because once trucks have left the ports of Northern Ireland, they can drive to the south of the island, and that means to the EU, without further checks, and from there by ferry to other member states in the EU. So the EU lets customs officials from a third country, Great Britain, monitor access to the internal market, and that would be a delicate novelty. The British government, for its part, finds the new customs bureaucracy vexatious in trade between Northern Ireland and the rest of the kingdom. London has therefore arbitrarily extended transition periods that make it easier for companies to import. In addition, in June, ex-Prime Minister Boris Johnson introduced legislation into the British Parliament giving the government the right to ignore parts of the protocol. It will still take some time before the explosive legal act can come into force, if Sunak pursues the goal at all, but the step was a provocation for the EU. The Commission responded with infringement procedures. At the same time, Commission Vice President Šefčovič made proposals as early as autumn 2021 on how bureaucracy and trade between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom could be reduced. The most difficult point of contention, however, is an issue that has nothing to do with checks. Brexit enthusiasts among the governing Conservatives do not want to accept that the protocol gives the European Court of Justice, the ECJ, which they hate, a role in disputes. From the Commission's point of view, however, only the ECJ and not some new arbitral tribunal can decide how EU rules are to be interpreted. And thanks to the protocol, EU rules should continue to apply in Northern Ireland. German exports to Great Britain grew again for the first time in 2022 after years of decline, also due to Brexit. From January to November, German companies sold goods worth more than 68 billion euros to the UK. That's an increase of almost 14% compared to the same period last year. This means that the level of 65 billion euros for the whole of 2021 has already been significantly exceeded, although December trading will not be included in the statistics for a few weeks. This emerges from preliminary data from the Federal Statistical Office, which was available to the Reuters news agency on Wednesday. That's the first increase in 6 consecutive years of contracting exports. The negative series began with the year of the Brexit referendum in 2016, in which a narrow majority of Britons voted in favor of leaving the EU, which has now been completed. Yeah, kind of. Politically. The Foreign Trade Association BGA is nevertheless skeptical as to whether business with Great Britain can continue the recent upward trend in the long term. The true extent of the Brexit problems has been overshadowed by the corona crisis. Great Britain has now slipped to 11th place among the most important German trading partners and is now behind smaller countries such as Austria and Switzerland. And I fear that we will feel the effects of this decision by the British people for years to come. Many companies complain that Brexit is still causing planning and legal uncertainty. Small and medium-sized businesses in particular see themselves as burdened by the many new regulations. Only new for British trade because they are old in the EU. British plans to deviate from EU rules and standards in many areas, such as data protection, food and chemicals, increase the costs and uncertainty for German companies doing business in the UK. After a transition phase that lasted until the end of 2020, a partnership agreement negotiated between the EU and the United Kingdom entered into force provisionally on January 1st in 2021. With the exit from the EU internal market and the customs union, Brexit was politically complete. The UK's exit from the US made bilateral trade more difficult and increasingly leads to heterogeneity in trade requirements, and no trend reversal is to be expected there, at least in the short term. Britain and Japan deepen their military cooperation. Soldiers from one country may now be deployed in the other state, as the British government announced. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida signed a defense agreement at the Tower of London on Wednesday. Great Britain is the first European country to sign such a contract with the East Asian state. It is the most important defense agreement since 1902, when Britain and Japan formed the Anglo-Japanese Alliance. In this increasingly competitive world, it's more important than ever that democratic societies continue to stand shoulder to shoulder in addressing the unprecedented global challenges of our time, said Sunak. The agreement with the G7 partners solidifies Britain's commitment in the Indo-Pacific and underscores joint efforts to strengthen economic security and accelerate defense cooperation. Just a month ago, Great Britain and Japan, together with Italy, announced the development of a new combat aircraft. The jet is said to be compatible with the machines of other NATO partners and eventually to replace the Royal Air Force's Eurofighter Typhoon aircraft. To protect companies from rising energy prices, the British government is extending its aid by 1 year until the end of March 2024. A total of £5.5 billion is available for this, as the Ministry of Finance in London announced on Monday evening. According to this, gas and electricity prices per unit will be reduced from April onwards. Up to £6.97 per megawatt hour will be automatically deducted from gas bills, and up to £19.61 per megawatt hour will be deducted from bills for electricity. However, this regulation only applies at higher prices, from £107 per megawatt gas and £302 per megawatt hour electricity. Charities and public services should also benefit. Higher price thresholds and discounts apply to energy-intensive companies such as steel producers. According to the previous regulation, which expires at the end of March, the prices per megawatt hour of electricity and gas are frozen. The 6-month bailout is estimated to have cost taxpayers £18 billion. It also applies to private consumers. From April onwards, these will also have to adjust to higher costs as the government is reducing its support. However, the poorest households and pensioners are to receive further energy aid. The Mainz-based pharmaceutical company BioNTech wants to set up a research and development center for cancer therapy in Great Britain. The company, known for its corona vaccine, which is available early, has agreed on this with the British Ministry of Health, as the government in London announced on Friday. The aim is to treat up to 10,000 patients with personalized mRNA cancer immunotherapies by 2030. In the context of clinical studies, early access to such previously unapproved therapies is possible. According to BioNTech, the next steps of the collaboration are the selection of the product candidates, the study sites, and the creation of a development plan with the aim of enrolling the first cancer patient in a study as early as the second half of 2023. The multi-year cooperation is also about vaccines against infectious diseases, that's what BioNTech said. Since the company was founded, BioNTech has been working on the development of mRNA-based cancer therapies that are specifically aimed at the individual tumor of patients. According to BioNTech, several hundred people affected have already been treated with corresponding product candidates as part of studies in recent years. The company's corona vaccine was the first approved mRNA drug in medical history in 2020. The British government has hinted at an initiative in the debate over supplying modern main battle tanks to Ukraine. It is clear that main battle tanks could bring crucial capabilities to the Ukrainians, and the Prime Minister told President Zelensky last week that Britain will provide what it can. That is what a spokesman for British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak told journalists in London on Wednesday. He also said Britain would accelerate its support for Kiev and provide the country with a kind of military technology that will help win the war. Sunak has instructed Secretary of Defense Ben Wallace to work with allies over the coming weeks to discuss how they can go further and faster in their support for Ukraine. That also includes the delivery of tanks. The media had recently reported that London was considering the delivery of Challenger 2 battle tanks. It would thus be the first country to deliver modern Western battle tanks to Kiev to ward off the Russian war of aggression. A final decision has not yet been made. That is what the spokesman emphasized, and he declined to comment on whether London is in talks with Berlin about the delivery of Leopard 2 tanks requested by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And he asked that because Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said on Tuesday evening, after a visit to the eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, that Ukraine needed additional tank supplies to liberate other areas. In German public television, she also defended the federal government's approach to the issue of coordination with the allies and proceeding cautiously with regard to the demands for the delivery of Leopard 2 tanks. Even if your heart is burning, it's important to consider together how responsible steps can be taken, she said. London wants to advance the investigation of Russian war crimes in Ukraine and, together with the Netherlands, has invited to an international meeting. In March, justice ministers from all over the world are to meet in London to organize financial and practical support for the work of the International Criminal Court in The Hague. That's what the British government announced on Saturday. Russian forces should know that they cannot act with impunity, and we will support Ukraine until justice prevails. That's what British Justice Secretary Dominic Raab said in a statement. The international community must give the International Criminal Court strong backing so that war criminals can be held accountable. Just a few months after the start of the Russian war of aggression, London had begun to support the court with technical expertise. Together with other Western partners, the British are also training Ukrainian judges and prosecutors. The planned satellite launch in Great Britain unexpectedly encountered problems on Tuesday night. It appears that an anomaly prevented us from reaching orbit. That was tweeted by the US company Virgin Orbit, and they would evaluate the information. An employee of the British Space Agency later described the mission as unsuccessful. The missile didn't reach the required altitude and the satellites couldn't be sent out. That's what the UK Space Agency Met Archer told reporters at Spaceport Cornwall. In the next few days, there will be an investigation to find out how the technical failure could have happened and how to proceed. A jumbojet had previously flown from British soil as a flying launch pad for space satellites for the first time. The converted machine, called Cosmic Girl, took off from Newquay Airport in southwest England late Monday evening as planned. At a height of around 10.7 kilometers above the Atlantic Ocean, the converted Boeing 747 aircraft was then to send a launch vehicle into space, which in turn was to put 9 small satellites into orbit. And apparently there were problems. What exactly happened was initially unclear. The plane, meanwhile, returned to Earth safely and as planned, they say. The US space company Virgin Orbit, owned by British billionaire Richard Branson, has been carrying out similar launches in the USA since 2021. In honor of the British rock band Rolling Stones, the mission was called Start Me Up after the hit of the same name by the group around frontman Mick Jagger. Newquay is one of a total of 7 planned spaceports in the United Kingdom. The first vertical launch of a missile is planned in Scotland later this year, and the government hopes the space industry will contribute around £3.8 billion to the UK economy over the next decade. The German discounters continue to celebrate successes in Great Britain. As the Lidl chain announced on Monday, it was able to increase its sales in the 4 weeks before Christmas by almost a quarter, with 24.5% compared to the same period last year. In the last week before Christmas alone, 1.3 million more Brits shopped at Lidl than a year before, and this trend will probably continue in 2023. The German discounters have been putting British supermarkets under constant pressure for 3 decades and are conquering more and more market shares. Competitor Aldi announced last week that it had achieved record results in Great Britain over Christmas. Together, the 2 German discounters now share a good 16%, with Aldi with 9.1% and Lidl with 7.2% of the market share in British food retail, according to the market research institute Kantar. Single-use plastic cutlery, plates and bowls are now to be banned in the UK. With this project, the government wants to reduce environmental pollution, as various English media reported on Sunday evening. Of the approximately 1.1 billion disposable plates and over 4 billion pieces of cutlery that are used in England every year, only 10% are recycled, writes the BBC. In addition, studies have shown that plastic items for consumption of food and drink account for the largest share of litter in the world's oceans. The British Environment Minister Therese Coffey now feels compelled to ban a number of single-use plastic items. Coffee is committed to take action to address this issue head-on. She expects the ban to have an enormous impact. Britain wants to help protect the natural environment for future generations, they say. Similar bans already exist in Scotland and Wales. Straws, stirrers and cotton buds made of single-use plastic were already banned in England in 2020, and now the next step follows. However, the ban should only apply to restaurants, takeaway shops or cafes, but not to supermarkets and shops. Here the government would work out a ban through other means, according to British media, whatever that means. Great Britain is not a pioneer with the government's project. In France, a new law to combat waste came into force at the beginning of the year. Disposable boxes or plastic cups may no longer be used in catering establishments. Anyone who needs help has to wait longer. A widespread strike severely affected the emergency services in large parts of Great Britain on Wednesday. Around 25,000 emergency doctors, ambulance drivers and emergency workers walked out of work in England and Wales. They are demanding higher wage increases in line with inflation, which was recently at a good 10%, and, probably more important, even better working conditions. The Conservative government, on the other hand, does not want to increase its offer of 4.75% more wages, which is based on the recommendation of a wage supervisory authority. They argue that inflation-based increases are unaffordable and will only drive consumer prices higher. Health Secretary Steve Barclay acknowledged on the BBC that the chronically underfunded NHS health service is under significant pressure. The dissatisfaction is primarily directed against long waiting times when transferring patients from ambulances to emergency rooms, said Barclay. He stressed that the government had promised investments. The NHS called for people to call 911 if their life is in danger despite the strike. The unions had announced that they would ensure basic supplies. General practitioners and pharmacies were open as usual, and it's not 911. This is typical if you watch too much American television. Patients should only dial the emergency if a patient is in danger of life or in critical condition, said the West Midlands Ambulance Service via Twitter. Ambulances are only dispatched for the most serious cases. In Great Britain, there have been repeated strikes in numerous sectors for months. Next week, new exits for the clinic staff are planned. Employees at the railway and post office also repeatedly stop working. There are also regional strikes by bus drivers and teachers. The government now wants to restrict the right to strike by law in order to ensure basic services in critical areas such as the health service, the fire brigade or rail transport. The opposition and the unions reacted with outrage on this. The revelations in Prince Harry's memoirs once again bring the dispute within the British royal family to the attention of the global public. But now a prominent political representative has sided with the royals. I think the public, like me, has enormous respect for the royal family, that they are deeply proud of them, is what British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak told the BBC. It's one of the things I'm most proud of when I think about Britain, he said. He hopes King Charles' coronation will be another fantastic opportunity for the country to come together and celebrate something that is especially for Great Britain. Sunak did not comment on whether the royal family had been harmed by Prince Harry's allegations. In general, he doesn't want to talk about the royal family. The BBC shared an excerpt of the interview on Twitter. Prince Harry's sensational memoir, Spare, is out since Tuesday, and because they were briefly available in several bookstores in Spain on Thursday, British media were able to secure copies in advance and publish quite spicy revelations. In the autobiography, Prince Harry bitterly reproaches his family, especially his brother William. Is Harry harming the royal family with his campaign against the royal family, or above all himself? That question is still to be answered. Over the weekend, an anonymous Tory MP and ex-cabinet minister was quoted in the British press as saying, "We are seeing the calm before the storm at the moment. If Sunak does not soon have successes in relation to Brexit and migration, then Sunak's opponents within the party will take action. It could be the beginning of a rebellion." And many would like such an uprising to be led by Brexit hero Boris Johnson. Some Tories are already preparing the ground for Johnson's return. A few weeks ago, Peter Crudas founded the conservative democratic organization, the CDO, with former Home Secretary Priti Patel. The primary goal is to give the approximately 170,000 Tory party members more say. However, with the ex-PM still enjoying a lot of grassroots support, it's safe to assume the CDO's real purpose is something else, to get Johnson back to Downing Street. One possible time to start such a campaign is the local elections in May. If the Tories do as poorly as the polls currently suggest, Labour is about 20 percentage points ahead of the ruling party, Johnson supporters would be quick to call for a change of government. But some political observers are skeptical about a Johnson comeback. The man himself has not given any indication that he would actually compete again. Add to that the fact that an investigation is still ongoing against Johnson. The so-called Privileges Committee of the House of Commons is currently examining whether he deliberately misled Parliament in the midst of the party affair. Should the committee conclude that Johnson is indeed guilty, it could recommend a suspension from Parliament, and the dream of a comeback would be dead in one swoop fell. And this concludes the news on British politics for this week, but I have a few things to add. First of all, you might all be still thinking, why is he not saying anything about the main channel? I'm not saying anything about my main channel at the moment because there's nothing to say. I'm still waiting for answers from YouTube on that. I'm waiting for a week now that something is happening, but nothing has happened so far. I got access to my Google account back, but the hackers messed up my channel that bad that they got it deleted immediately by the algorithm, and that's what has to be sorted out if they can restore my channel at the moment. And I'm waiting for an answer right now what's going on. So I need more patience than a Vulcan at the moment, because my long-term viewers can imagine how I feel without my income base. And that's why I'm not in the best mood, but I'm trying to do my best for you every day, at least here on my channel. If you haven't seen it yet, my book channel, Outside Views book channel, that's called Bookstagramm, is also running. All channels are, the list of all channels is in the description of this video, and several of them are still running. The others were linked to my main account, and I can't publish anything there, but they are still there. Only my main account is gone at the moment, but I can't publish anything new there, but maybe you haven't seen them. So browse to the channel list in the description of this video, and you will still find thousands of videos there, because I did a lot of work in the last years. And of course I will be back on this channel with European politics, and I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.